to the Power Platform Show. Today we have Brad Koontz on the show, and we're going to talk about pre-sales as well as repeatable IP, something he has a massive amount of experience in over his long career in the Microsoft business application space. Full show notes for this episode can be found at nz365guy.com/198. Now let's get on with the show. Hey Brad, welcome to the Power Platform Show.
Mark, thanks so much for having me.
Good to have you on here, and I feel the topic that we're going to discuss today, which is going to be heavily focused on pre-sales and also spinning out intellectual property or IP as part of running a successful practice, and the journey that you've been on and what you've found. But before we get underway with that, tell us a bit about yourself. What part of the world do you hail from, and what are you known for?
Well, I live in Atlanta, and I was one of the few that were actually born in Atlanta and are still there. I think it has grown like crazy. If you've ever spent time in Atlanta traffic, you can understand that. We had the Olympics back in '96, and I think our population went from 3 million to almost 7 million today. So it's been quite a ride. But anyway, born and raised there, a lot of family members and friends that live there. So that's where I am.
So, I've been to Atlanta a few times, and massive city. Of course, my focus has always been around the convention center with Convergence, and more recently, Microsoft Business Application Summit was there last year, right?
That's right. Microsoft, it's one of the ones that's in their rota. So, for sure.
And so, what else is Atlanta famous for?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that for visitors, I hope that when visitors come to Atlanta, they spend some time with the food. The food is fantastic. I think something that's happened to Atlanta in the last 15 years or so is that the neighborhoods, especially the ones that are closer into town, have just gotten really, really cool. I can remember when I was growing up, that maybe wasn't the case. But I think now you can make a case for, if you're the urban explorer type and you think your idea of a vacation is to go to a big city and just wander around Greenwich Village and Soho in New York, and if that's your kind of thing, that Atlanta has options for that kind of stuff now. So I think hopefully people will know Atlanta for that in the coming years.
Nice. What about your family?
Yeah, family's all here. We've got a 13-year-old son, a 16-year-old daughter, my wife Lauren, and we've got our hands full with those two for sure. We do a whole lot of golfing in our family. I feel pretty blessed because I'm a struggling golfer as well. And as someone who used to need to kind of make up excuses to get out to the golf course, it's great now because now it's the kids that are dragging me out there. So,
oh, wow. Okay.
So we have a big time with it.
So do you have a handicap?
I do. It hasn't budged much in the last 20 years.
Classic.
Yep.
I played with golf for a while. Let's say 2 years. I played regularly, weekly. And then it just became, I would tee off and then I'd be on a countdown to the final hole. And I was just like, obviously not enjoying this anymore. So I stopped.
Right.
Yeah. So different things for different people, I suppose.
That's right.
I still have my clubs, though. I haven't sold them.
You never know when you might need them. So
Exactly. Well, see, the thing is that back in the day when you used to do conferences, even with Microsoft, is that often there would be a conference golf game,
right,
across, particularly in the partner ecosystem, right?
Yep, that's right. But I tell you, I would say in the last 5 years, I've probably played that kind of golf 3 or 4 times. It's just not much as it used to be, for sure.
Yeah, definitely changed. Do you have a thing there called Ambrose? Is it Ambrose golf is a common thing in the US?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, it's kind of like where, a team of 4 people get selected from, different companies. Each hole has a sponsor on it. There's, drinks at every hole. And it's like a big business networking type thing where you're paired up with different folks and, always entertaining. So basically, one ball, the first person tees off within your team, and then the next person takes the next, down the fairway, etc., until the final person, might putt it out type thing. So
it sounds like a lot of pressure.
Yeah. But of course, things go a bit awry the more you get to, the 18th hole as the drinks are flowing around each of the holes, on the way there. So, that's what I remember in business golf.
Yep, exactly.
Anyhow, tell us about pre-sales and how did you get in? And how has pre-sales become a big part of your career? And what is pre-sales? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I'll start with kind of how I got here because I think that they're a little bit related. I started in this business actually as an ERP consultant. And, anytime you're in a big ERP consultancy, there is a kind of a need for people to really specialize, right? Because ERP systems do so many things that are mission critical, and you want to make sure that the finance guy can go deep in finance and the folks who are working on the warehouse can do the same. So as I first got into that world, I became the, kind of that piece of the back office that was APAR, but also customer service. And if you remember the early days of AX, it did have a CRM module. People are surprised about that, but it absolutely did have one. And I became a little bit of a specialist in that, although, it wasn't widely adopted. It wasn't widely used as part of the AX package. But what kept happening is that you had companies, existing customers that we had, that wanted to see how else they could be using their system. And so even though I was consulting, show of hands, who wants to go show the CRM module inside of AX? And I was really the only one that knew that it was even there, let alone how it worked. So that's how I got into it.
So have you stayed your entire career, as in from a pre-sales perspective, on the AX side of things, or did you branch across Microsoft's broader business application suite?
Yeah, I got into the other parts of the application, and I think the way that I did, if you think about the corner of AX that I was focused on, and as that was kind of winding down on the Microsoft side, that's when they were really ramping up on the CRM side. So it was a pretty natural step for me to walk over to that side. And then I went straight into a pre-sales role for Customer Effective back in about 2010. So that's how I kind of made that leap. And I've been in pre-sales almost entirely since that point. There was a period recently we can talk about. I know we're going to talk a little bit about IP, but I was just focused on IP for about 3 years, kind of in the middle there. So
tell us a bit about your time at Customer Effective, because they're one of the kind of standout names in the industry up to being acquired. Whether it's Joel Lindstrom or Scott. Those are kind of probably the common names I knew out of it, but it's always had a bit of a legend associated with Customer Effective. What was your experience like there?
Oh, it was a great time to be working for Customer Effective inside the Dynamics channel. The two names that you mentioned, obviously, Joel Lindstrom, absolute legend. Scott Millwood, who we both know. Scott was the one who hired me at Customer Effective. And it was a really, really great organization. They were a little unique, not towards the end, but at the beginning, they were a little unique because their message to Microsoft was really about industry and IP very, very early on. And they really wanted to hyper-focus on financial services. So that was the messaging to Microsoft that enabled us to get a lot of leads and a lot of customers in the financial services sector. But we were also pretty darn good at manufacturing as well, and we still continue to be. So that was kind of one of the really unique things to be able to do that. But yeah, I mean, the list of, kind of famous in this channel alumni from Customer Effective, I could probably look at the list of folks that have been on your show in the past, and it'd be a big old stack that are Customer Effective alum, for sure.
Totally. Now, one thing you said there is around industry and IP and how you were very focused in that. We'll talk about IP shortly, but industry, what did you mean by that?
Well, it's really about a focus, right? I mean, you think about a Microsoft implementation partner, big or small, and even for the ISV channel partners, right? How are you going to differentiate yourself within the channel? And so what we found is that, for one thing, I'll tell you the way not to do it is to go sell, any sort of enterprise software package, and you send a big team on site, and the first day they say, okay, how do you guys make money again? That's a good way to start your project off. The worst way to start your project off. So the focus on industry really is about, and it starts in pre-sales, right? You send somebody who has knowledge inside of, I'll go private equity, right? You send somebody who understands how private equity firms make their money and what their needs are going to be with that particular software package. It needs to be the salesperson, because they need to talk to the right people and they need to know who the real decisions. And that's going to be a heck of a lot different. That motion right there is going to be a heck of a lot different than if you're going to a process manufacturer, for example, right? And the customer will sniff you out, right? And so for us, it was really about focus. The truth of the matter was the place that the Dynamics market was at that time, it was kind of wide open. We kind of could have gone to a lot of different types of industries, but we looked around and said, okay, what have we been good at? And then, and what do we have the people and the capabilities to support? And that's how we kind of ended up with that financial services plus kind of marketing and manufacturing and distribution as kind of our focus areas there.
Yeah, makes sense. In your mind, what is pre-sales?
Pre-sales. So first of all, I love pre-sales. I always have. I say to our team and I say to anyone else who's considering to get it in, I truly believe that if done right, the pre-sales person can be the rock star of the sales cycle. right? They can come in, they can show off the really cool tools, they can show people how they can improve their work lives, they can do all of this cool stuff. Then they pack up their plane and go to another town and do the same thing. So if done correctly, it's great. I will say I don't love the name pre-sales, right? I think it's a little bit of a misnomer. I think it's a little diminishing to the impact that the role has on the sales cycle. And it's not completely accurate. If you think about the amount of activity that our teams go out and they are showing the software product, showing custom solutions after the go live in some cases. In some cases, the most interesting work, especially as this platform extends, some of the more interesting work that you do takes place in the second and third stage. Because if it used to be, 10, 15 years ago, this entirely waterfall, rip and replace every time you did something, that's different than what it is today. We can go in today and we can talk to an organization about, all right, you know what we're going to do, guys? We're going to give you a simple opportunity management system for this piece of your organization. And if that's successful, then we're going to go to phase 2. And so our team is not only involved, in getting that logo on that first phase, but our team is also involved for the life cycle of the customer. And so that's why I think pre-sales is a little bit of a misnomer.
So if you're defining it, what would it be?
Well, I think that the simplest way, I don't know what the right phrase for it is, right? But the way that I look at the role is a couple things. In simplest terms, a pre-salesperson has to keep the sales cycle moving, right? A pre-salesperson who's ineffective can stop and slow down sales cycles. I've seen that happen in the past. But when it's successful, a pre-salesperson can keep the sales cycle moving. But if they're good, they can also, in some cases, challenge the customer, right? Sometimes the customer is coming to us with as-is processes, right? How do we take this as-is process and how do we digitize it? And that's not digital transformation, right? That's something lower than that, right? What we want to be able to do is challenge the customer to the extent to say, okay, we've done some demo discovery, we understand what your pain points are. We understand what you're trying to do. This might be another way to do it with this proven tool that we've used in the past. And so if a pre-sales person can be doing that and thinking in that way, assuming that what they're saying is, above board true and that the delivery team can deliver on it and that's all good, then that's what makes, the pre-sales person the rock star of the sales cycle, because they can push that a little bit further than what the customer thinks needs to happen, because sometimes they're too deep into their own day-to-day processes that they can't see the art of the possible. And that's what pre-sales can do.
If you're choosing pre-sales folks for your team, or for one of a bit of a term for them, What strengths are you looking for?
Well, there's so many soft skills, right? The ability to command a room is huge. I think that the pre-sales person needs a little bit of servant leadership whenever they do it, because I said they serve at the pleasure of the customer and the pleasure of the sales cycle, right? So they need to be able to have that kind of humility. They need to be the smartest person in the room without reminding everyone that they're the smartest person in the room in a lot of cases. They need to know when they're not an expert in everything. Think about the breadth of the platform that we live with today is 10x what it was 5 years ago, right? It's just gotten so big. I remember when somebody could literally know everything there was to know about the CRM platform, and you could probably know 1/2 of AX, right? It's not even close to the case anymore. It takes an army of folks to be deep experts. And then the other thing too, obviously the table stakes are, do you know the product, right? There are some cases where we've had some folks that have been so good with the soft skills that we've then trained them on the product. I think especially younger generations are quicker to ramp up and get deep quickly on software than I think some of the folks who have been doing this for a long time are. So there's another good case there.
What about specific skills?
Yeah, like I said, I think the skills to command a room, one of the best pre-sales people that have ever been on my team, he spent his college years working in a magic shop. And, not to say that we're magicians and trying to fool people, but certainly somebody with that kind of dramatic flair is pretty valuable in kind of a pre-sales thing. And somebody who knows how to kind of connect with an audience that way too. So that's always been fantastic.
Yeah, I was always taught it was infotainment.
That's right.
That we're providing a lot of information and you had to do it in a way that was entertaining.
That's right.
And engaging,
And Mark, you've been in this business a long time. I have a lot of empathy for people who have to sit through 6 hours of demos in a day, Even when I've been on the buying side of software And man, you get past 20 minutes on me and my ADD kicks in and I just can't take it, So I have a lot of empathy for folks who are doing that. So,
yeah. If you're looking at traditional consultants within an organization that want to transition into this role, what are the key things you're looking for besides what you've discussed already?
yeah, and we do get this request a lot and we get inquiries a lot about this. I think there's a couple things. Well, I think one of the traps that folks fall into when they do come out of delivery, and I came out of delivery too, right? So I understand how this happens, but you can fall into a trap quickly of teaching a class rather than demonstrating the software. And that's one of the things that if someone is in that, delivery into pre-sales kind of role, we want to make sure that we knock that out of them pretty quickly. And the other thing is that they need to understand that the pace of their business life is going to change drastically, because typically if you are involved in delivery, depending on the platform, but shortest case, you might be with one customer for 3 months. Maybe you've got two on your plate. Maybe there's some overlap or whatever. But in our case, we have guys and folks on the team that are demoing 3 times a week, and they're big demos. And sometimes they're different, but they are different customers, that's for sure. And so you have to kind of be able to keep that together. So your old cycle of 3 months to sometimes 3 years that you'd spend with 1 or 2 customers, that changes to about, most of our folks are actively working on, call it 3 to 5 deals at a time. And so that's your customer load, and it's going to roll over every single week. It's going to change.
Have you found that somebody can stay in a delivery role as well as be in a pre-sales role, or have you found they really need to dedicate themselves to pre-sales? In other words, become non-billable or an individual contributor perspective and really move into that sales part of the organization?
Yeah. So I think 2 ways that I'd answer that. And the first one is that absolutely, and we've done this in the past too, where there's someone who maybe has not done pre-sales in the past and they're in delivery currently, but they're looking to make that move. And we can, in some cases, we set up, a 3 to 6 month plan to say, all right, this is how you're going to ramp down this, and this is how you're going to ramp up on the, customer facing pre-sales part of things. And so we've seen that be effective. I've also seen it be effective where you've got, a case where there's different platforms too, right? Maybe on, I wouldn't even call ISV, but maybe on a platform that has a very, kind of discrete workload, and you've got somebody who's passionate about that. And we've had cases where that person might be the de facto pre-sales person to get that thing sold, and then they go deliver it. In a lot of cases, it's a short cycle, and then they can kind of start over. The problem there becomes a business one because of the lumpiness of the billing, the lumpiness of, is this a cost of sale or is this a producer, those kind of things. So I'm with a pretty big organization, and those kind of hiccups to designated roles, become problematic. So
yeah. What resources should someone go out and invest their time in if they really want to become a rock star in this kind of pre-sales role?
So I think you can't underestimate the power. I think what Microsoft does from a Microsoft Learning thing right now, I think those resources are really, really good these days. A lot better than they were, 13 years ago for sure. I think those are very good. I think that there are some presentation and soft skills, demo to win. I've got a dog-eared copy on my desk. I highly recommend that to anybody who's doing it. It's something like Toastmasters. And when I was getting started in this, I got a little involved in Toastmasters. I've had some team members who've been very, very involved in Toastmasters. So things like that can really, really help folks. And they're investments of time for sure.
Yeah. There'll be listeners that have heard me, present quite a bit, and they would have thought I'd primed you for those exact answers because, demo to win is my, go-to. I did demo to win training years ago with Microsoft, probably would have been 12 years ago, might have been. And it was probably the most effective training in my life. That really took my career in a different direction, particularly in that pre-sales space.
Yeah, I agree. I did the same thing. I did that one. I did Discover to Win.
Yep.
And I'm actually, with the rest of the team, we're going up and taking a refresher course here in about 3 weeks. So
Yeah. I think the author comes from Atlanta, doesn't he? From memory. And the whole book was around selling ERP.
That's right.
That's what his background was,
That's correct.
Yeah, but definitely I can't recommend the courses enough. And of course, I'm a big advocate of Toastmasters.
Oh, good. Okay.
For people to find their voice. Like, I spent the last 18 months in London, and I was going to Toastmasters the entire time. And, I'd done it in New Zealand earlier in my career as well. But I've just noticed that they become like a new person
Yeah.
when they can understand how to discover their voice and articulate clearly to those around them and basically become effective communicators through the spoken word, so highly recommended as well. Okay, so one last question around pre-sales, and we'll jump into IP. Tell me about this roles that sits within the wider sales team, whether it's the account manager, customer relationship manager, whatever you type of call them. What have you seen works effectively in that engagement life cycle from uncovering an opportunity to closing an opportunity and the various people that play their part in that dance?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, traditionally, and I think if you've ever been taught, CRM 101, you think that leads just magically drop into this top of funnel, and they probably come from a website, and then people are just out there clicking around, dropping you leads, and then somebody remotely, just decides if that lead's good or not. And then the next thing you know, you're sitting in front of them, giving them a demo. And I don't think it works that way, maybe 5% of the time in our business. I think that the way, especially the pre-sales folks, can be effective in that is kind of what I mentioned earlier about the art of the possible, right? And it starts with discovery. It starts with, okay, I've heard you, Mr. Customer, talk about what you think your needs are today. But let's not only address those things, let's address phase two. Let's also address maybe a secondary or better way solving that first problem that you brought to us. And so being able to uncover those things is big. It's good for, not just a pre-sales team. We have customer success managers that really kind of bridge that gap from the sales cycle into the project and then for the rest of the customer life cycle, right? And they try to stay close to that person. So for me, making sure that the pre-sales team stays close to the customer success managers so that they can keep an ear out for these things that may be bigger opportunities, for your organization to help the customer utilize the software better, drive adoption, drive the next phase of whatever it is they're trying to do.
What are you noticing from a Power Platform perspective? So, you've come from a traditional Dynamics, practice, same as me. And what I've noticed is that a lot of practices, partners, Microsoft partners have maybe to some degree struggled with articulating their Power Platform offerings, where do Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI, and now Power Virtual Agents come into the mix. And is it a separate practice? Is it just a transition on from the Dynamics 365 type of things, side of the business? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'll tell you where we started as an organization. Where we started was a little bit reacting to the messaging that Microsoft was putting into the marketplace, which was, hey, listen, Mr. Customer, you can do all this yourself. If you say that enough and you say it loud enough, then the message you're putting, and maybe, we're just being a little Pollyannish as partners, but we heard that and we said, hey, whoa, you do need us. You really do. And I think early days, what we had happen was there were customers that were heeding that advice. They were going off. They were building a lot of Power Apps by themselves. Then they were coming to us after the fact and saying, why doesn't this work? And what are my performance issues here? And what are my, don't we have some data security issues here that we need to address? So that was kind of early days. I think firms like ours are evolving is to say, you've got to treat that tool set the same way you've treated other tool sets in the past. Like we as partners need to have that discipline and kind of enforce it and enforce that messaging back to our customers to say, hey, listen, these tools are great. And yes, you can build an app in a day. And we still do apps in a day and it still has value to us and the customers. But for us now, we have to look at it and say, hey, listen, yes, this is a new tool set. And guess what? Part of it is, by the way, it's called XRM, and we've been doing it for years. So, so we know
exactly.
it. Yeah, so we know it pretty well, and we can build a pretty nice project and a pretty nice solution for you and with you around this platform. There were some other things that we used to have to go to ISVs for, whether like Power Automate. And those types of, they can get pretty complex, the flows that you build there. And we used to have to use ISVs for that. So we understand this space, and the tool set is different. It's bigger and shinier and louder now, but we feel like it's our responsibility with customers to say, hey, listen, let's take a step back from the shiny tool and the shiny object that you've got right there. Let's talk about what your business needs are, and let's talk about how we're going to solve this. And to your question about a separate practice, Not necessarily, not the way that we have, practices that are dedicated to the different platforms. We think that there are enough similarities with our other skill sets that we can manage it from the existing practices.
Interesting. I definitely see Microsoft in more recent times are starting to talk a lot more about three key roles that they're seeing in this: the IT pro, the pro dev, and the citizen dev. And I think, there might have been an over-indexing on that citizen dev story, which is the customer can do it all themselves.
Right.
And we're starting to see, if you like, a bit of a pendulum swing back the other way, I suppose, to some degree, to find the new operating environment that we live in now. Let's move on and discuss IP, intellectual property. I know you've had a lot to do with this. Tell me a bit about your experience and journey, intellectual property development.
Yeah, so when we started, and it really started back, and I mentioned this earlier, back in 2010 at Customer Effective. And, the basic strategy there was around industry, right? So you start asking yourself, okay, how do we prove our chops in a particular industry? Well, you can prove it with people, you can prove it with customer success, but another way you can prove it is with pre-built stuff, and we would literally show up with, instead of showing up with, CRM out of the box and, hey, here's how you could configure this because you're a bank to do bank kind of activities inside of this. And you're talking about bank customers and, hey, Mr. Insurance Agency, this is how you can configure this. But we would show up with a full, data model built inside of Dynamics that already had, a 3-tiered sales model, which is not out of the box in Dynamics, but is the standard practice for insurance, insurance carriers. And it worked, and so we were able to do that. Some of the challenges, especially in those kind of early days, came with, okay, so if you're using that to do deals, but at some point you kind of start to have some internal resources that have to build and maintain this stuff, right? And so how do you cover that cost? And then you start getting into, okay, are we going to use this to win deals, or are we going to use this to not only win deals but maybe get a license revenue so we can pay for some of these developers that we have that are supporting this with this big customer group we have? So there's a little bit of struggle there because, well, firm I work for is not an ISV, right? We're not wired that way. But what we did find in a couple of cases was there were some sweet spots. There's a sweet spot around, for example, an insurance solution that's built on Dynamics 365 on the CE side that showed great value to insurance firms. And so we were able to, we had a go-to-market strategy. We had, full put it in a box, gave it a name, gave it its own nice logo, and it's still around and it performs well. And we have a couple of other examples in some other industries where that's done very well. But like I said, I think the struggle that you have sometimes is organization says, are we an ISV or are we professional services delivery organization? And ours is the latter, for sure. That's not changing. But we also are able to go to the customer and say, listen, we are going to deliver this beautiful CRM-based solution for you. And it's going to be, 80% of it is for insurance, just like you, but you are special and you're going to have 20% of requirements that are going to be different. And our team's going to be here and help you get that done, as well as all the integrations, as well as the performance testing and everything else. So.
Okay, so that's very interesting because, the first time I've really heard this articulated is the switching from, the system integrator consultant company to ISV. It's not that you're going out and wanting to sell ISV solutions through third parties. This is your own ISV solution that enables you to grow or win sales within specific industry sectors. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's correct. We have some criteria. If the product has a customer base, if the product has support needs, if we have an obligation to continue and improve on this product, we call it a product and we put a price tag on it. It's not substantial compared to the cost of the project for the customer. But there is some psychology there to say that, if you don't put a price on something, people think it's worthless, right?
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that going on there. And so it has been successful. But at the end of the day, the idea around IP has really always been just to sell more what we've always sold, which is services. So
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so tell me, Microsoft Consulting Service, or MCS, and this is years ago I came across this, they had a model where even staff were KPI'd on extracting IP from projects. In other words, identifying this is something that could become repeatable. and therefore reusable across, MCS, which I think at the time was around 25,000 people around the world. And that was part of their KPI because I picked up consultants out of that organization in the practice I was involved in. And what I found is that it was a mentality within the team to look for what could be turned into IP. How do you make sure you're extracting that repeatable IP across so many projects that your organization be running at any time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, like other fun things in life, you have to create a system around it, and you kind of have to adhere to it, right? If you sit around and you wait for the smart people that are out doing projects to proactively bring those things to a centralized repository, it's not going to happen, right? And so what we've done in varying degrees at different times, but ideally you have, what I would call, we've called it forever, a post-project tech audit, right? If you think about, okay, if you have a PMO part of your organization that goes in post-project, they're going to talk to the customer about customer satisfaction. They're going to talk to delivery team about, did you get your time entered? Did you deliver what you said you were going to deliver? That kind of thing. But there has to be a next step that says, what problem did you solve? What technology did you use to solve it? Any ISVs you have? Any interesting stories that you have here too? And this is another thing. And we literally have a field on a form that says sticky stories. And it's where people can go and, oh yeah, I've got a great story here. It doesn't fit nicely into these other boxes of questions that you're asking me, but it allows us to do that. And we've got a pretty sizable database because we've been doing this for 7-8 years now, and it's pretty good. And so when a customer asks me, says, have you guys ever integrated with X? And I can just go into the system and do a search. And while they're on the phone, say, yes, we did it at this project, this project, this project. So it's been good for us. Now, is that IP? Not really. That's a good story that we can tell. But what comes out of those audits, and this is where you've got to kind of that discipline around it. We do, a monthly review of what was entered into that. And then we'll go through and we'll, highlight anything that we want to go capture, highlight anything we want to invest. So we've done it that way. And then the other way that we've done it, we still do this, is we have an innovation portal. And this is not something we invented, but it's the ability, because sometimes you have folks who maybe are creating things that aren't necessarily on a project. It could be a piece of a project that never went live because of budget, but the design was done. And we allow them to enter into the portal. And we give cash bonuses for, impactful ideas and impactful solutions that get entered there. And then at the end of the year, we take the best ideas, the 12 folks who contributed the most, and we go somewhere fun and we have a 3-day hackathon.
Wow. Okay. That's very cool.
And I think it shows our commitment to IP, right? I think the idea there is that the whole organization needs to be involved in this. This is not Brad and Mark sitting around thinking of cool ideas and then building the prototype. These are field-proven ideas in the most of the case, and that's how they become impactful.
I love it. So tell me the outcomes of that 3-day hackathon. Are you then looking that you would have something to the point that, let's say, it would have a sales sheet, a brand logo, and the IP would be solutionized, for want of a better term, to that it was, lift and shiftable with, hey, do this to light it up, or if you're going to demo it, do this. Have you got it to that point by the end of that 3-day hack?
No, and I think when we started this 5 years ago, I think we thought that would be the output. What we found is that what we end up with is a good demo at the end of that. We end up with a pretty good story. And we've had cases where, probably 4 or 5 of them have evolved into customer solutions, and a handful of them have evolved into solutions that are part of our, sellable IP stack. So they've evolved, but we've never been able to, just not enough time, for one thing. Also, we're a big, diverse practice. And when we build these hack teams, we try to have a multi-platform approach. That the hacks themselves are not always multi-platform. As a matter of fact, because time commitments, they're actually not. And so sometimes, you have things that might be really, really solid on the ERP side because that was the focus of it, but maybe not solid on another side of functionality. So it's a good starting point for us. It's been a great demo, and it's been a great reward for everybody contributing stuff.
So then do you have a formal team that's job is to get that, after all that, the good demo, good story, etc., that is to take it, if you like, the last mile and turn this into a strategy? In other words, your go-to-market around it, that you would go out and you would pitch this solution plus, of course, the pull-through of services.
Yeah, so we do. We have an organization, we call it the Open Innovation Center. And I think I mentioned earlier, when I was not in pre-sales for a number of years, I was full-time within the Open Innovation Center. I had a passion for it. I'd love to get these systems in place and kind of have that innovation engine running. But that's all they do, right? I mean, their role within the organization is to manage those things, right? Manage the innovation program. And then also, we have a lot of customers who, depend on us for, updates of our software that sits up upon the Microsoft stack. And so we've got a number of developers who are totally focused on that full time. So yeah, they're totally focused on that.
Anything you want to add around IP harvesting, creation, that type of thing?
No, I think that's interesting about MCS that they had not heard that they had done it. I'd heard that some other partners had done that in the past. I certainly know we didn't invent it, but I think it's very valuable if you can get the folks focused on it to do it.
Yeah. One question, it's a bit out of left field. Have you seen any common denominators of what makes consultants, so working within Microsoft practices, super successful, and perhaps then the flip side of that, probably career limiting moves is too strong a term, but some that don't get ahead, but the reason they don't get ahead is themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the successful consultants that I've worked with and I still work with, all the time, it is very, very easy in the kind of consulting work that we do, right, to get insular. And I think the folks who are successful are the folks who over communicate, like period. So the ones who are over communicating, especially with the customer, the ones who communicate, good news quickly and bad news more so, those are the ones that can kind of get stuff done. And it gives customers some comfort when they work with folks who are open and honest and over communicate those kind of things. And then I think the opposite is, the ones who maybe aren't successful are the ones who don't kind of step up on those kind of issues. So
yeah, interesting. Something popped to mind there, which is something Joel Lindstrom taught me years ago, which is, when you're on a project, bad news doesn't get better with time.
That's right.
The sooner you identify it and communicate it, time makes the rescue a lot harder. And it stuck with me.
And that's true in life too, I've noticed. So
yeah, so true, so true. Okay, let's wrap up with some quick fire questions.
Oh no.
And I mean, these are random, I don't tailor these at all. I just lucky to dip them. So here's your first one. What activity or sport did you try as a kid and failed at?
Oh, that's a good one. Tried and failed. Baseball. I wanted to be a good baseball player. I just wasn't, And it took 3 seasons in middle school to kind of figure that out. But luckily, by the time I got to 9th grade, the baseball coach and the golf coach told me separately, listen, right now you're not that good at either sport, but you're going to get a lot worse if you keep trying to play both. So just pick one, because the swings are opposite. So
what was your first car?
A 1979 Fiat Spider.
Okay. Here's one that's going to require you to think a bit. What is something that you're certain you'll never experience and why?
I don't know if I'll ever go to Antarctica.
Oh, okay.
It's too far, and I watched the Anthony Bourdain where he goes there. So I kind of feel like I was there and I've done everything that's fun to be there because I watched that episode. So yeah, that's probably, and I think the other thing, there might be a theme here around snow, but I don't think I'll ever ski again. I've retired from skiing. Another thing I'm not good at, but yeah, I took the family there a few years ago, and the amount of money you spend to get on top of that hill and then to not be good going down. And we all just said, you know what, maybe we can do other things as a family. So
I like it. What's your guilty pleasure?
Oh, probably craft beer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Very nice. Any favorites?
I'm on a big IPA kick right now. Probably have been for a couple of years. Before that, it was all about the German Hefeweizens. But yeah, now I'm on a big IPA kick. And the one that gets me that I just love is the Elcian Space Dust IPA that I always get when I go to visit Microsoft in Seattle. I can probably have one of them because they make you a little space dusty after more than one. But no, I do love that brewery.
Yeah, I've seen them there and my mate always grabs them, but I've not tried them. I mean, in London, I like Camden's. If you ever go to London, try Camden's.
Okay.
Anything from Camden's really great. And then if you ever get to Western Australia, anything from Little Creatures. Very nice, very nice. Anyhow, would you rather experience the beginning of planet Earth or the end of planet Earth?
Oh, wow. That's deep, man. I don't think either one would have been much fun or would be fun.
I don't think you'd have survived either one, I think.
Yeah, I'll go beginning because at least you got a chance for a little while, right? Until the elements get to you. But the end is the end, then you're, lights out.
Yeah. If you could pick up one skill instantly, you had to do no 10,000 hours prep or anything like that, but you'd have it instantly, what would it be?
This is so easy. It would be play electric guitar.
Oh, wow. That's very cool.
That's it.
Very cool. Is that something from your youth?
Yeah, I've been a big music fan my whole life. And I didn't, my family was not very musical. So it was never something that was, we didn't have guitars sitting around the house. Mom wasn't getting us to play piano lessons or anything like that. But I just have been a music fan my whole life. And I'm like, why have I never played guitar? I just never got around to it. But anyway, that would be it. I have a recurring dream where I'm an awesome electric guitar player and I'm playing in front of thousands of fans. And then I have to wake up. So
I love it. I love it. I've experienced such dreams. So who do you recommend as a guest on the show in future?
So James Bowen, he is a global black belt with Microsoft for field service.
Okay. Yeah.
He is out of Atlanta. He was on my pre-sales team for a long time before he went to Microsoft, but he is a fantastic dude. One of the cool things about James is, you asked about, what kind of prerequisites somebody needs to be in pre-sales. And, you talk about platform knowledge and this kind of thing. James was with an ISV, Sales Fusion, I believe.
Okay. Yep.
Back in the day. And he had demoed to us and, the integration with Dynamics back when he was doing it was not great, but we really admired his demo skills. And then, Sales Fusion was going through some things and we were able to, go grab James because we just saw a person who loved what he did and loved sharing it with other people. He had great soft skills, great presenter, hardest worker, And so we hired him. He put his head down and, he learned Dynamics with, in kind of record time. And then he was just kind of off to the races. And so he's great. He's hyper focused on the field service side of things now. And yeah, great dude. He'd be great for this.
I just looked his profile up. I can see he's into mixed reality as well. I'll reach out to him and see if we can get him on the show. Brad, if people want to connect with you, post the show, they want to pick your brain, something like that. Are you on any social media? What's the best way or do you publish anything that people can kind of follow what you're doing?
Yeah, Twitter. It's probably Twitter that's where I do most posting on this kind of stuff. So I'm on LinkedIn, but yeah, Twitter is probably where I'm the most active.
And what's your Twitter handle?
It's at Brad Koontz.
Hey, thanks for joining me today on the Power Platform Show. Full show notes for this episode can be found at nz365guy.com/198. Remember, I'm your host, Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 Guy. If you find these shows interesting, I would love your feedback. I've had a few people in the last couple of weeks give me ratings on iTunes. So if you would like to go and do that, I'm trying to hit 20 feedback. And to get feedback, or for the feedback to show up to the public, everybody's comments, etc., I need at least 20. And so I'm currently sitting around 13. So if you want to be one of the 7 new reviews, I would really appreciate it. You can go to nz365guy.com/iTunes and I'll redirect you direct to the page. Just one note, it's been pointed out to me, you need to have an iTunes account to actually be able to leave a review. So just one little caveat there. I'd really appreciate, though, if you would do this for me. Anyhow, if you have a guest suggestion for future shows, make sure you let me know. You can hit me up on LinkedIn, perhaps send me a private message there. That would be fantastic. Otherwise, bye for now.